Welcome back. I'm Nathan Baird from Indy Star.
Sam came from the Journal and Courier inside the noisy Amica Mutual Pavilion where they're tearing down the basketball court in the arena for today's second round NCAA tournament game. A Purdue 76-62 victory over McNeese State, where this is exactly kind of the Purdue team that I think people wanted to see and to feel good about its NCAA tournament chances.
Yeah, by the way, normally when we say tearing down, it's not literal, but here it sounds like they might literally be tearing this place down, which I'd be kind of fine with. Wasn't that impressed with Amica Mutual Pavilion this weekend? No, you're right. I thought, if you had said, what are the two main things that Purdue had to answer this weekend? What are the two big vulnerabilities? Shooting kind of comes and goes. I don't think there's not much you can do about that sometimes, but defense, keeping teams out of the post, keeping things out of the paint on defense, and in rebounding. They feel like a team that was always going to be susceptible to a team that really crashed the offensive boards especially, and Purdue holds them, these two teams to 125 points combined and out-rebounds them by, 38 combined over two games. And this is today's was, I thought, we thought coming into today that this was going to be an answer that we needed offensively. That McNeese, with what it showed against Clemson, both defense and rebounding, was going to potentially cause Purdue problems. And I thought that tone that was set in the first few minutes, where they really carved up McNeese offensively, I think this team talks all about energy. I think that energy transferred over to what you saw defensive rebounding that sustained really throughout the game, even when the offense started to falter a little bit.
Yeah, and after the game, I was talking to CJ Cox, and I didn't even ask him about this. It just kind of came up where he said, there's been times this year where we don't make shots, and you have to get down, then you don't have the energy on the defensive end, and that's when you get into a little funk, kind of on both sides of the court, and how you ultimately have situations like the game that happened at Indiana. And he said, we have to be able to do that defensively even when we're not making shots. But today, making shots, kind of, as you said, just transferred over, and it felt like over 80 minutes in the first two rounds of the NCAA tournament, I felt like Purdue was locked in for about 80 minutes.
Yeah, I thought Treacoff and Wren today was huge. And it started on the offensive end, I thought, where, they did what they had to do against what McNeese State came out and did. They were able to get him the ball. That, Matt Painter talked about after the game, that they weren't sure what McNeese was going to give them down there, and if they were going to try to, use multiple guys to deny getting the ball inside to Treacoff and Wren. But once they were able to get it over their defense and into his hands, it led to a couple early baskets. I thought even more crucially, though, he made some great decisions and some good passes, knocking it back out to the perimeter, and guys knocked down shots. Purdue made its first 6 shots, I think it was, in this game. I thought they really carved them up early, and they needed that foundation, because I think you're right. We've seen on multiple occasions, whether it was the Michigan game comes to mind in the Big Ten quarterfinals, I think, where when they're not hitting shots, it affects them in other ways. Probably even the USC game, although they hit more shots that game. But we've seen it down the stretch where this team, if it's not making shots, it affects it in other ways. And if it had not made shots early, maybe the same thing happens today. But when they hit those shots early today, like I said, you could just kind of feel this team's confidence and poise building. And then when those shots weren't falling, to me, I thought the crucial stretch of this game, the last 6 minutes of the first half, Purdue made 1 of 7 from the field. They stopped hitting shots. It was not a good stretch.
Pushed its lead during that stretch.
And it increased the lead. Now, it had helped that it's a little bit of a misnomer to say they were 1 of 7, because they also had built a good fouls advantage early on, and were able to use that at the bonus in those last few minutes. I think they were 6 of 6 at the line, but still, they were able to expand the lead when they weren't making shots, and it was because they were holding the other team down defensively and rebounding.
Yeah, absolutely. And going back to the original point, because people forget now, because Treacoff and Wren ends up with 3 assists. He had 3 assists in the first half. I specifically asked him, what are you doing there when you get the ball? And he said, the same way that Braden Smith has reads based on how teams are defending, he has reads once he gets the ball on the pick and roll or whatever it is. And he said, he kind of used that to his advantage today, was able to get it back out to shooters, which got things opened up. You saw Purdue early just kind of crash down the baseline and get an easy dunk for Caleb First. the baseline was exposed on the first possession. Trey Kaufman-Renn gets a spin and a dunk. That was, those are high percentage shots that it's kind of sometimes allows your 3-point shooting to come around. But then, it was there from the get-go. And I think the play that really signified that this Purdue team is maybe different mentally than just a couple weeks ago was 4 minutes to go in the first half. Braden Smith dives for a loose ball, gets it, kicks it ahead to Miles Colvin, who goes up and gets fouled. And, that's your best player putting himself in a position where, it didn't look like a positive outcome, because if he gets the ball, it's probably going to end up being a disadvantage and McNeese having a favorable offensive mismatch there. Instead, he kicks it ahead. And then it's a media timeout, I think, after that. And Braden Smith is just swarmed by people coming off the bench being like, hey, great job, way to hustle. That's kind of the energy we need. And when your best player does that, it's easy to trickle down 9 or 10 players deep.
And he's trying to, pump the crowd up as he's walking back over to the bench there. There was, a good Purdue crowd right behind the bench. I thought that was a big moment too. I thought it was the one way that you lose games like this is maybe there's 2 ways. One is like somebody starts hitting circus shots and you just get beat on tough shots. Little Rock, for instance, did that to Purdue several years ago. Or you just get outworked and you get outplayed and you get out hustled. And Purdue wasn't going to let McNeese do that today. I thought that was something that McNeese, with a good coach, with a bunch of guys who had gotten the nerves out and improved themselves, probably coming in pretty confident with the way they won that Clemson game on Thursday, that they could come in and take it to Purdue a little bit. And Purdue, I thought in those first few minutes, knocked them back. We've been kind of waiting for them to come into a game like this because they didn't do it against USC. Some other games down the stretch where maybe it just wasn't as emphatic as it should have been. They didn't make that first punch and then follow up and keep punching. And there were so many games where, they would get up to a double-digit lead. I'm not telling you guys anything you don't know, but the Ohio State game, the game at Michigan, multiple games down the stretch. Indiana, oh my God, Indiana. Games where they're building double-digit leads and then it just fritters away. And I thought today, just being able to maintain a high floor on defense and back it up with rebounding, reward yourself with the rebounding. And actually, McNeese ended up with something 13, 14, something offensive rebounds. I've got it here. That's not the total for the game. Actually, it's only 7 on this list. I thought it was more than that, but it seemed like more than that. But the defensive rebounding was a problem point all season, or a question mark all season. There were only 6 games all year where Purdue had a double-digit rebounding edge at the end of the game. And only 3 of them had happened since Thanksgiving. It's Thanksgiving weekend in San Diego, and they were against Rutgers and USC, which were just Big Ten afterthoughts. And to come into the Big Ten tournament and post 2 in a row, I thought was a little bit of a statement, but obviously one that they then have to carry forward to Indianapolis next weekend.
Yeah, very much so. I imagine there's going to be a nice home contingent, but that doesn't always mean that you're going to win. You still have to bring it. And I like your point there, because that's something I asked a couple of players in the locker room was, how did you, when shots weren't falling and you had a 15, 20-point lead, still step on that team's throat? And, I think Fletcher Roy was like, sometimes that's hard to do when shots aren't falling. But it was kind of one of those things where Purdue wasn't going to be denied today. I thought this was defensively as aggressive and really good, keeping the ball out of the paint as Purdue's been in a long time, if not all season. You forced the team to take shots from the outside. You didn't let it get into a rhythm. And you put a team that's, they were 28-6. So a team that's not playing from behind very much in a situation where they're not comfortable or not used to.
And this was not a strong shooting team. They had one guy coming in who I'm trying to remember his name, DJ. Can't remember the name now. DJ Richards, I believe. DJ Richards Jr. He coming in was about a 43% 3-point shooter on heavy volume. So they had one guy who could really stroke it out there, but he was 0 for 4 in the first half. They were going to let McNeese try to beat it from 3. It was coming into this weekend. The whole focus was they cannot let teams get into the paint. They cannot let teams get the ball inside, because it's giving them easy scoring chances, and they're getting beat on the outside when they kick it back out. It's just leaving them vulnerable in multiple spots. And for the most part, I thought they pretty much walled that off this week. And you saw today. Now, McNeese did hit some shots in the second half. I think they were 2 of 12 at halftime. I mean, you're going into halftime up 18 based on the way that you locked them down in the first half. And that's going to be a tougher thing to replicate. You're not going to be facing double-digit seeds from here on in. You've got either, at the time of we're recording, either number 1 Houston or number 1 seed Houston or number 8 seed Gonzaga, which by the numbers, you could argue is one of the more underseeded teams in the tournament potentially. That's who's waiting on you in the regional semifinal on Friday. It's going to be tougher. They've got to find a way to carry the effort forward, though. I think that was maybe the most important thing. It just wasn't really a schematic win today. It was an effort and want to win.
Yeah, and one thing you have to take into account, if it is Houston, that is the best defensive team in the country. Yeah. You're not going to get easy looks. You're going to have to earn every point you get, and Houston wants to get you into a low-scoring rock fight, which at times has been, something that Purdue's not comfortable with. Purdue wants to control the pace and get out and get fast breaks. So we're getting ahead of ourselves there. More pods to come this week, but
sure.
Just the energy and the effort kind of does have to translate moving forward. The things that even when shots aren't falling, you can always go out there and play hard and be assignment sound, and you can't get away from that just because certain things don't go your way throughout the course of the game.
Something else I thought, and it relates back to Trakoff and Wren, that he had the famous when he told us after the Michigan game, I'm one of the most physical players in Big Ten, or the most physical player in Big Ten, whatever he said. And I thought he had to show that at times today. This was a pretty physical game. This is like the most blood that I think I've seen them have to address in a game all season. But at the same time, talking to him after the game, I thought what he did today had as much to do with his brain as anything else, because on paper, they would have looked at this team and saw, well, they've got one guy who plays any minutes of consequence that's taller than 6'6". And there aren't many teams that Purdue's going to face all year that they have the height advantage on. And if they thought that alone was going to be enough, then they might have been in trouble. But I think this team is veteran enough and smart enough that Trakoff and Wren took more notice of the fact that McNeese State, despite that height disadvantage against Clemson, still out-rebounded them by 7. And it's one of the reasons they won that game. I think that was in his mind more than whatever the roster said. And I thought you saw that in just kind of how relentless he was on the boards today. And just you're seeing veteran things happen from veteran people. And it hasn't been the case all season. I thought, Matt Painter, when he was asked about Trakoff and Wren's rebounds after the game, very quickly was like, well, hey, he's had some games this year where it's like 22-3, 25-4. And I looked back since in January and February, he had 6 games that were 4 or fewer rebounds. Right. But over the last 6 games, he's averaging like 9 rebounds a game. Like he's really picked it up
in each one of those games.
Yeah, so he has really picked it up lately. Today really spiked that average, obviously.
Today, career high 15.
Career high 15, yeah. And only one game where I think he had a 13 in one other game. And again, he's not been a hugely prolific rebounder throughout his career, but today was a team that he obviously had an advantage on, and it was just a matter of having the will and the effort to go out and impose that, as opposed to just assuming it would happen based on your size or whatever.
Yeah, and Miles Colvin as well, I thought was tremendous on the boards today. I talked to him after the game about that a little bit, and he said, kind of stupidly to my, the way I phrased the question, is like rebounding is always an emphasis, and still, you don't rebound like this all the time. Part of that is your opponent, but I thought he was kind of relentless. Jakari Harris is a guy that's becoming really, really good.
Yeah.
Just being comfortable in his role, giving you rebounds. He's not scoring a lot of points. He'll hit a 3-pointer every once in a while. Sometimes he goes to the basket and gets a layup. But he's not going to be a guy that's going to go out and give you 10 or 12 points in a game right now, probably. And he's doing other things defensively, ball handling, helping bring the ball up the court against the press, defensively, doing little things that Purdue needs those complementary players to do to move forward in March Madness.
Yeah, Harris had a really good weekend, I thought, and you had seen this coming. I think we saw this kind of coming. He's playing his best basketball, as you would expect from maybe a true freshman. Multiple people have been talking about, I was asking Terry Johnson about the defensive performance these last 2 games, one of the co-defensive coordinators on the staff, and he brought up that, the effort and whatever, but we also got a break. Like, Purdue thought that the little break that they got between losing to Michigan and having to come out here to play on Thursday was a little bit rejuvenative to some of these, especially some of these younger guys who probably needed that in their legs and just in their lungs or whatever. But Harris has 13 rebounds in 30 minutes out here. And, per 40 minutes numbers don't necessarily mean a lot, especially for guys coming off the bench. But that's getting up towards like averaging about 18 rebounds per 40 minutes, which small sample size. But when you can replicate that off the bench, then I think that really starts to add up. And then today, him and Colvin together, it was 11 rebounds in like 30 minutes. Like you're starting to see where, as we've talked about many times, go back to what Cam Heide has done this down in these last couple games, including on Thursday. Like you're starting to see the role players kind of come to the forefront a little bit, like not getting overshadowed by Braden Smith and Trey Coffin-Renn and Fletcher Lawyer, but at times almost overshadowing them. Like those guys are still going out and scoring points and doing other things. And those bench performances are sometimes almost the loudest performances of the day.
I'm going to tell you something that I just thought of my head that I'm very impressed with, because CJ Cox, as we've noted, is from this area. And when you go to your hometown, especially being a freshman, you want to go out and have a big performance when you bring a lot of friends and family. And he said after the game, listen, the other day I didn't have a lot of opportunities. And he never forced it. He never tried to force himself into, just taking bad shots or whatever. And today he let the offense come to him, and he hits 2 really big threes for Purdue. One of them to answer a McNeese basket, and I think it was 30-13, so it doesn't feel like it's that big, but it was. And then there was a 9-0 run in the second half where Purdue hadn't scored in like 5 minutes, and then CJ Cox hits a 3. And that's just kind of being patient and not overplaying because of the situation that you're in or being in your hometown or whatever. And I thought that that's maybe another guy who's a little unsung hero throughout the weekend here.
They literally are tearing this piece up. If you saw my face there. No, and that one that he hit was right at the end of the shot clock. And as soon as he hit it, I thought back to a conversation I had with Matt Painter in November about CJ Cox. It populated a lot of the feature that I wrote on him earlier this week, actually. That's how long I've had that thing in my back pocket. And one of the things he talked about was how much he liked him at the end of shot clocks. To have a guy with his poise and someone who's not going to overshoot it, someone who's not going to take you out of the offense by trying too hard to find his shot, but someone who is ready to take it when it comes to him. That was a big theme for this whole team coming into today, from talking to PJ Thompson yesterday, was that McNeese is good enough on defense that if you don't take the first good shot that they give you, you will not get the second one. And when you over dribble, you're playing into their strengths. And I thought Purdue, especially early in this game, I think Heide hit one, Lawyer obviously hit some. Like they did a good job of snapping those off as soon as they got it in their hands.
Yeah, very much so. Braden Smith hit one that was a really tough shot. And when that went in, I was kind of like, okay, Purdue just might be having one of those days.
Yeah.
But Trey Coffin told me yesterday, we've got a lot of makes coming our way, and I'm excited for it. And then that's the first thing I thought when Purdue comes out and starts out 6 for 6. I was like, okay, here we go. Purdue's going to drop 100 on this team. Didn't keep that pace, but
no.
Definitely it was great to get off to that kind of a start, when there's a lot of nerves. And then, like we said earlier, just to kind of keep building on that and pushing through. The score got not close, but it got respectable late. But that was just a lot of turnovers late on Purdue's case. And the score ended up looking a little bit closer than maybe the game was.
They turned it over 6 times in the last 4 minutes. The biggest consequence of that was it turned what would have been like a 24-point win into a 14-point win. They definitely didn't sound like they were happy about how that finished. But at the same time, I think the more important stat was with about 11 minutes to go, they had turned it over either 12 or 13 times. Braden Smith had 6 on his own. He finished with 8. But at that stage of the game, they had turned it over all those times, and I think McNeese had like 2 points off turnovers. Right. So again, they were happening. It was like Wilbur gets a 3-second call, which I think happened about 4 seconds after he went into the game, and there were some offensive fouls. Or Smith would turn it over, but it was always on or somebody would try to force it into Trey Coffin-Renn inside, and that didn't give McNeese a chance to get out and run with it and get those pick 6 baskets that have sometimes really killed Purdue. So that's something that they can't turn it over 19 times from here on in and probably end up winning the game. I'd be highly suspicious of that, but I think they can clean that up, which they have done over recent weeks, and just make sure that they avoid the backbreakers. You don't want to lose possessions, especially against a team like Houston that's going to limit them and make you work hard to be productive on the ones that you don't turn it over on, if that's who they end up playing. Or you don't want to turn them over give them away against Gonzaga either, because Gonzaga's going to score points, and you're going to have to try to keep that pace. So I didn't come out of today like concerned about that on Purdue's behalf, right? It didn't come out today. I felt like that was very much overshadowed by all the positives of how they won both of these games here.
Yeah, and this listen, the star of this weekend here in terms of the what the storylines were was the manager from McNeese, and as ridiculous as that sounds, and Will Wade departing to be North Carolina State's coach, which that sometimes can kind of be a distraction, and good on McNeese's case it wasn't, but Purdue kind of overcame all of that and just stayed focused on what it does. Didn't worry about the outside noise. That's one of the things Fletcher Lawyer talked about after the game. Like, we didn't care what media was saying about us. We didn't care about what we read on social media. It was just kind of Purdue was focused on Purdue, and that's really what got it to the run that it had last year. Now, going to Indianapolis, Lucas Oil Stadium, like we said, going to have probably a good home contingent, and you're there. So that's step one. And now you just have to outplay a team for 40 minutes. You don't have to be better than that team all season long, and now you've got a week to prepare for whoever it is.
And this team knows what it's like to be deep in the NCAA tournament, except for the freshmen, but they're led by a group of guys who are pretty comfortable in their own skin in this scenario, I think. So, I don't know if Indianapolis is a good thing or a bad thing. Like, you would think that being home is a good thing. Purdue's history in Indianapolis over time, whether it's the NCAA tournament, whether it's the Big Ten tournament, especially the Big Ten tournament, has not been super excellent over time, but it's a different venue. Actually, it's not Gainbridge, it's Lucas Oil Stadium, so that changes the dynamic a little bit. And it's interesting that last year the first round was in Indianapolis. This year they're going to the Sweet 16 in Indianapolis, and then next year, obviously, the goal all year is going to be to get to the Final Four in Indianapolis.
Right. So Indianapolis is the recurring theme out of this. Purdue plays a neutral site game in Indianapolis every December. This year it was against Texas A&M, really good team. It plays those games for moments like this, where you're playing a really good team in a kind of a big time atmosphere to kind of simulate that and kind of be the closest thing that some of these freshmen get until they get into that moment. But anyway, we'll have more pods this week regarding that, especially once we know who Purdue is playing, especially when come Thursday when we are at Lucas Oil Stadium, talking to players, talking to Matt Painter a little bit more. Is there anything else you wanted to add from Providence?
I think this is it from Providence. They got to get out of here before they pull this place down on top of us. But we will bring you more Boilers Extra early this week, and then certainly probably from Indianapolis when we get to talk to Purdue's players and coaches again on Thursday in preparation for whatever they have coming up on Friday. See you then.